So what's the latest on what you're hearing about the president?
Well, he is really unstable right now, Anderson. And what we've been hearing from our sources over the last several days is that he has been ranting and raving about any number of things. Obviously, he's upset about the impeachment. Obviously, he's upset about the fact that he's going to be leaving office in just about a week from now. And one of the things that we're hearing in just the last several minutes, Anderson, we've been able to confirm that the president has been pushing away advisors who won't tell him what he wants to hear about the election and impeachment and so on. And he's been listening to people like Steve Bannon. We understand that he's been back in touch with his former chief strategist. They've been talking about the president's conspiracy theories about the election. In addition to that, my White House colleagues are also reporting that the president has been having discussions with aides about the prospect of resignation. Every time that has come up, he has pushed that aside and yelled at his aides when the subject has come up. He has also warned his aides, according to my colleagues, that any talk of Richard Nixon is not welcome in the Oval Office. He doesn't want to be compared to Richard Nixon. And one of the reasons why he doesn't want to resign or isn't even considering the prospect of resigning is he doesn't think Mike Pence would pardon him. I've also heard that from a White House advisor in recent weeks, that the president has doubts as to whether Mike Pence would pardon him. And so his mind, Anderson, at this point is filled with so many things other than the responsibilities and duties that come with running the country.
Does he have a legal team assembled for the impeachment in the Senate?
My understanding, Anderson, is that, yes, he does have, I guess, the beginnings of an impeachment team. It is nothing like we saw during the first impeachment process when he had sort of a legal dream team. I'm told that, he is talking to people like Rudy Giuliani, even though he may not be paying his legal fees, people like more fringy lawyers like John Eastman. But there are some attorneys who are not going to be part of the legal team like last time, people like Jay Sekulow. And Anderson, what we're hearing at this point is that what the president's legal team is planning to argue is that if he leaves office, he is essentially no longer legally eligible to be convicted and removed from office now that once he's the next president. That is something that his own legal team will be arguing during this impeachment process, and that the president's remarks on January 6th, while incendiary, fall under the category of protected speech. Those are the expected arguments that we're planning to hear, we're hoping to hear, thinking we'll hear from the president's legal team, according to a source familiar with those discussions, Anderson.
Jim Acosta, stay with us. The Nixon comparison, part of your reporting, is interesting. We wanted to bring in someone who masterfully told the story of Nixon's final days, Carl Bernstein, the investigative journalist, is also now a CNN political analyst. Carl, President Trump lashing out over comparisons to Nixon is particularly interesting. In many ways, you and I talked about this, I think it was last night, the end to this presidency, you were saying, is much worse than Nixon's.
Well, first of all, Nixon was not a secessionist, seditious president of the United States who inspired and celebrated a riot to burn down the Capitol, which is really what occurred. He encouraged it. Those people went there because of his incitement. Nixon was in a different category in that regard. He was a real criminal president who deserved having to leave office, and Republicans got him out of office, forced his resignation. Very different than what we've seen with Trump. The Republicans have enabled him and allowed him to stay in office. We saw in the House yesterday how Republicans continue to defend him, don't want to see him impeached and convicted, at least in the House they don't. Yet at the same time, there's something fascinating in what Jim has just reported, and that's about the pardon question. Look, the worst place you can be probably in the world, not just in America, is in Donald Trump's head. But you know that when Donald Trump says things about he doesn't want to hear anything about something, often he does want to hear about it. And I hear in there perhaps a little bit that if Pence indeed was willing to pardon him, perhaps he would be willing to take it. But he doesn't trust Pence to do it. In Nixon's case, President Ford waited a month before he pardoned Nixon. He refused to pardon Nixon in the final days, but a month later decided, for the unity of the country and for him to have his own presidency at a time of great economic crisis in the country and other crises, that he would pardon Nixon. So there's something quite fascinating in what Jim Acosta is reporting there.
Jim, do you think we've discussed this. Do you think the president cares about his legacy as president, or is it simply the brand, the Trump brand, and the potential to make money in business deals down the road?
My understanding, Anderson, and this is from talking to sources, is that the president is basically clueless about what this is going to do to his legacy, that he doesn't fully grasp the magnitude of the fact. I think the very real likelihood that he's going to be placed at rock bottom of the list of presidents in terms of how they're viewed by historians. I mean, this is a president who has been more Jefferson Davis than Thomas Jefferson. And, you know, to pick up on what Carl was saying a few moments ago, the fact we've never had a president of the United States foment a riot and insurrection and a potential takeover of another branch of government in the way that we saw with President Trump. And I think the key question that Republicans are going to have to deal with during the Senate impeachment trial is whether that crime goes unpunished. And I think that has the potential to take the Trump stain that is on the Trump brand and really just paint with a broad brush I guess another, shameful stroke across members of his own party, unlike what we saw during the Watergate saga. Obviously, Richard Nixon was guilty of a great many things, but there were good Republicans who took it upon themselves to make sure that Richard Nixon was not able to get away with what he was trying to get away with. It's a very different situation with Donald Trump because, the Republicans might once again, in a second impeachment trial, let him get off scot-free. Anderson?
Carl, Nixon, correct me if I'm wrong, Nixon worked on rehabilitating his reputation. That was his sort of major post-presidency project, wasn't it? Sort of becoming a counselor or a senior statesman to other politicians. It's unclear if that's something President Trump is even capable of.
Well, it's also unclear the degree to which Nixon succeeded. He wrote some very interesting and remarkable books, but he still was a pariah because of the horror of his crimes, which included, very similar in some ways to Trump, undermining the very basis of American democracy, the electoral system, through a series of burglaries and trying to engineer the nomination of a particular Democrat through undermining the electoral process. But the real difference in the final days is Nixon was not a deluded, deranged, out of control president of the United States who has to be restrained in a constitutional straitjacket, which is really what is going on now. The military won't heed his orders. We know some about that. The people around him are trying to restrain him because they think he is dangerous, that he does not have any idea of the national interest of the United States, nor has he for a long time. Nixon, in his final days, though he was drunk part of the time, went to introspection. He summoned Henry Kissinger to the Lincoln sitting room in the second floor of the White House. They got down on their knees. Nixon said, "Henry, you're not an Orthodox Jew and I'm not an Orthodox Quaker, but let's pray." And Nixon started sobbing and pounding the carpet and saying, "What have I done? What have I done?" And then the next day, and remember what Nixon's crimes were, his abuses of power in going after his enemies, seeking vengeance on his enemies, much like Trump does. And the next day, at his farewell, he said the ultimate introspective comment about what he had done. He said, "I gave them a sword to destroy him." We'll see nothing like that, and that kind of understanding from Donald Trump.